Good morning. It is a good morning. It's a great morning. So, can I have your attention, please? Welcome, welcome, welcome. After this wonderful moment, which we felt like it could have gone on forever. That was magical. We are going to move on with our program, and we're about to watch a video, which some of you may have watched already. It was the link was included in the documents you were sent. And here we're going to talk about, again, questions of inclusion and exclusion, and analyzing barriers to access. And you will see that in this video of a young man in the United States, a young Black man who gets accepted to an extremely elite university. And the story he tells is about how getting accepted is not the whole answer, that there are sometimes codes that you may not know because you are not from this socioeconomic class. And so what we are going to do here is we are going to take some time. We're going to watch the video. There are subtitles, so if you have trouble understanding his English, you can read the subtitles. And then we are going to make sure that the content is clear. We want to be able to focus on some of the questions that he asks. How does poverty manifest itself? And ask ourselves, how does this show up in our own institutions? And we're going to look at these questions that he asks in his own video, but we're going to apply them to our own institutions. So right now, I would just like you to be sensitive to the issues that he raises about how just because you're inside an institution doesn't mean you feel completely at ease or included, and you may not know all the codes that may actually allow you to go further. And after we watch the video, we'll take a few minutes to just ask if anybody has questions about understanding the video, and then we're going to take it from there. So for now, we're going to watch the video. Please make notes if you have any questions. We can come back to them afterwards. Thank you.
I remember the first time I stepped foot on the Amherst College campus. It was with my mother and brother. We drove up from Miami. The flights were too expensive, and besides, we were all afraid of flying anyway. We pulled up to Pratt Dorm, got out of the car, took deep breaths of fresh country air, but then my brother starts to laugh. He saw a little critter run across the yard. He said, "Tony, y'all pay how much for school here, and y'all got rats?" Y'all, it was a chipmunk. We had never seen a real one before. His joke barely hid his excitement. It did nothing for his nerves. We were in another world. So yeah, me, here, a Harvard professor in an opera house, it's a testament to the fact that even undreamt dreams come true. I'm the proud son of a middle school security guard, the brother of a janitor, both hardworking but neither college educated. I'm from a poor, segregated community in Miami that even my local newspaper called a place time forgot. There are often more struggles than celebrations. High school was the finish line. When I was growing up, there were only 3 Ivy League schools: Harvard, Yale, and Princeton. And the only reason why Princeton makes the list is because of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. But such is the pernicious power of poverty. It isolates and it separates. It creates 2 worlds occupied by the haves and the have-nevers. So much so that people equate poor students like myself making it into college as having made it. The golden ticket not to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, but to those bastions of power and privilege. Yet getting in is only half the battle. Colleges, like many organizations, have invested millions in diversity recruitment, but have thought less about what to do when students arrive on campus. Access ain't inclusion. Part of the reason why is because colleges get their new diversity from old sources. My research is the first to show that colleges get half of their poor Black students from boarding and day schools. 1/3 of Latinos are too. I call these students the privileged poor. Colleges like poor students from private schools because they have cultural capital, those taken for granted ways of being that are valued in mainstream institutions. The other poor Black and Latino students attend local, typically distressed public schools. They don't enter with the same cultural capital. I call these students the doubly disadvantaged. It was my interviews with 103 undergraduates that show how poverty and inequality stop those who made it. You see, when students enter college, whether a community college or an Ivy League institution, they encounter a hidden curriculum, a system of unwritten rules and unsaid expectation. Professors throw around class terms like office hours, yet they only say when they are. They never say what they are. You see, colleges expect students to be comfortable engaging faculty. I mean, this is the road to recommendation letters. It's the road to emotional support when times gets rough. Connecting with faculty is even valuable for your GPA. One research project showed that each visit to office hours corresponds with a 1.25% bump in your final grade for that course. Yet, this expectation goes unsaid. There's no manuals of do's or don'ts, when's or how's. And unspoken, if undergraduates want something, they will come, operates as the gold ticket. The college corollary to the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Imagine the culture shock then that the doubly disadvantaged experience. It was otherworldly for Valeria, a lower income student from the Midwest. Her teachers spent more time maintaining order than making connections. She entered college believing in the American dream. She believed that her advancement should be about the work. It was how her father saw the world. It was also how he told her to see it as well. Mija, you don't want to get ahead by kissing ass, right? You want it based on hard work. It'll take longer, Mija, but you'll feel more proud. Let us not be quick to label this father's advice as bad. In 2016, a dean from Dean College reached out to me. She wanted to know how could she increase academic engagement among her lower income students. I said, let's start with something basic. Let's define office hours. Something I said resonated with her. When she finally asked her students why they didn't visit her in office hours, they said, Miss, we thought that was your time to do your work in your office undisturbed. It's a reasonable assumption to make. Something was lost in translation that had nothing to do with English proficiency. But let us remember the privileged poor, those alumni of prep schools where contact with faculty is not only encouraged, but built into the structure of the place. Students like Agun. A reflective Latina, Agun hails from a troubled neighborhood, but attended a New England boarding school. She was taught in high school by PhDs. PhDs were also dorm parents. She entered college feeling entitled to talk to a professor and say, hey, I want to meet with you. My high school told me I can do that. It's actually my right. Even when her professor was away from campus, she had no qualms calling him for virtual office hours despite friends' surprised looks. Undergraduates from America's forgotten neighborhoods and ignored schools are truly disadvantaged if colleges continue to privilege privilege. We cannot assume that all students have had a chance to practice, let alone master these skills before they arrive on campus. And as office hours in college become open door policies at work, this process, it can continue. We wonder why we can hire diverse applicants, but we can't seem to promote them. Recommendation letters in college are dependent upon relationships with faculty, just as promotion at work is dependent upon relationships with superiors. For me, I went to Gulliver Prep and learned how to navigate office hours similar to Agun. I got those letters of recommendation, one even coming from the college president. I learned that it's not just what you know and who you know, but also about who knows you and how well they do. But I am not so naive. The stumbling blocks to inclusion are not merely social. Colleges take for granted not just what students know, but also what they can afford. Sometimes the very policies that colleges implement hurt all lower income students, the privileged poor and the doubly disadvantaged alike. Colleges' decision to shut down during spring break, assuming that all people can leave for fun in the sun, is a case in point. But what if you can't go home? Or what if you don't have a home to go to? Or what about for you if hurt and home are synonymous? Campus, for better or for worse, is your refuge. Yet professors flee and friends leave. Buildings close. They even turn down the heat in the dorms. You walk past the cafeteria and the lights are out and the chairs, they're stacked on top of the tables. You walk past the cafeteria and the lights are out. You literally can still, though, see the plates and trays, the forks and knives through the fence that bar you from entry. It comes as no surprise why poor students like Ariana call spring break the real Hunger Games. But just how close it comes to living in the districts is downright depressing. When campuses close, students combat food insecurity, not knowing where their next meal is coming from. Sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures. I attended a conference for first-generation college students, and I met a young woman. She was white, witty, and wore her hair in a pixie haircut. She had on a blue Columbia University sweatshirt. She stood brave in a room to discuss how she spent her last spring break at one of the most wealthiest colleges in the country. She increased her online dating activity the week before spring break to secure dates the following week. Banking on gender norms of older men paying for the first meal, she treated OkCupid as if it was DoorDash. She treated Tinder as if it was Grubhub. Outpriced and overextended, she offered her time. This makes no sense. But this is a reality for many students across the country. 2 out of every 5 undergraduates in America are food insecure. Instead of investing time learning linear algebra, many invest their times making ends meet. The question of if diversity is worth it is ever present. And not just at colleges, but at organizations of all stripes. The answer is yes, it is. But we should not be surprised when certain new groups struggle. These unwritten rules and injurious hurdles don't just trip them up, it keeps them on the outs. We must move from access to inclusion, and data will help in this endeavor. I've shared with you just 2 issues that undercut diversity's efforts: the hidden curriculum and food insecurity. There are many more, both social and structural in nature. So I'll leave y'all with this. What else do we take for granted? Thank you.
So thank you. Before we move on to the exercise that we are going to do in language groups, do any of you have any questions about the content? Was there anything that was not clear? I would just add, as somebody who comes from the United States, that some of the references are more cultural references to situations you would know in the United States and maybe less so here, but I think that it is still very relevant. Questions?
Can I ask a question? What is GPA?
Grade point average, it's in the United States, the grade point average goes from 1 to 4. So if you have an increase in your GPA, it means that your overall grades averaged together are higher. Goon?
G-O-O-N.
Oh, goon is a kind of fool, or some of the, I have to say, some of the subtitles were not correct. So I'm sorry for that. Yeah. Other questions? Okay, so now we are going to move into language groups, and those of you from Kharkiv will stay with, yes, will be with Croatia. Poland, I'm sorry, yes, we changed. Yeah, you're going to be with Poland, and I'm going to be with the group from Rome. So we're going to meet downstairs, down here in your groups, and with your moderators, you're going to ask questions that are on the sheet here, and share your responses relative to your own institution and your own experiences. And we will do this for 35 minutes. Esther? 35 minutes. So we meet back at 11:15 here? Yes, 11:15, 35 minutes. So I leave you to find your groups. You all know who you are. Please. So it looks like everybody had a lot to say. And what we would like to share now, we are going to put these sheets up afterwards so you can look at them. But we're going to ask each of you to share one example of inclusion and one example of exclusion. And I'm going to start in the north of Europe here with Madam Megan.
Thank you so much. So we have a really good students' union, and we have loads of organized events, so that includes everyone. And one example of exclusion would be, am I going too fast? Okay, so we have a students' union that organizes loads of events, so that includes all of the students. And one point of exclusion would be the physical premises at the moment. So we have a new building being built at the moment, and that's created a divide amongst staff and students and admin. So yeah, eventually, yes. Okay, I'm going to pass on the mic. Here you go.
Okay, we have one example for inclusion. Our institutions, they noticed how needed support would be for students who are not as wealthy as everybody suggested, that we need support for the students for their digital devices, and our universities very fast solved those problems by substitute those things. Inclusion, exclusion, we have two examples. I take the first one. We have, I don't know the word in English, I'm very sorry, but in German it would be Matura or Abitur, your final exam when you have been to A-levels. The A-levels would be. And it's not necessary to have the A-levels to pass the exam for a music university. You don't need it. So that means you can come from every school possible to enter the music university. But then in German-speaking countries, you have to to write a thesis at the end of your studies, your bachelor thesis. And then there is required scientific knowledge, which they don't get enough at our universities, because there is the hidden curriculum that everybody has the A-level and has done scientific work in school, but it's not necessary to enter the university. So this would be our bad example.
So I have some examples from the Zoom group. What we talked a lot about in the beginning when it comes to exclusion is kind of the difficulty it is to afford studying, but also living in the city where, like in this case, it was Dublin and Rome, and kind of seeing that people would have to reduce their working hours in order to afford traveling to Dublin or to come to Rome for their classes. That's something that we really talked about. And then we also had an example of inclusion where it was possible in Rome, as far as I understand, that to concentrate lessons in 1 or 2 days, so that you would be able to concentrate your lessons in these 1 or 2 days, and then are not required to travel or to take a side job on the other days. Although, of course, that would also exclude you from kind of extracurricular events that, you know, that would be really good for your career. So it's both an example, like, it's difficult, like it's both an example of inclusion, but might potentially also exclude you when it comes to further networking.
Okay, we've chosen two examples, one for inclusion, which we had quite an extraordinary case of a teacher, very, very good teacher in guitar making, luthier, you understand the word? Who was a child refugee in France after the Spanish Civil War. And he crossed all the barriers he found in the way and got a very high standard for teaching. And for exclusion, we've got examples of access for students who don't speak Spanish here at Musikhochschulen, but when we come to the classes are in Spanish. So they are excluded for understanding most of the class because they don't speak Spanish. Of course, we provide them language classes, right? But by the time they get to understand Spanish, they are missing lots of classes. So access is not equal to inclusion.
I will pass the microphone to Monica.
Hello, hi. I will start with exclusion so we can finish on a sweet note with inclusion. So the example for exclusion is something that actually happened to me 2 weeks ago. So we had a method of clarinet teaching exam, and in Croatia you have you have 4 chances to do a test, and you can choose either of them based on if you want to, don't want to, it's not obligational. So you have 2 in the summer, 2 in autumn. 2 weeks ago, I spent my week on rehearsals for an orchestral project outside of the academy, but a project for which I got money to buy an instrument. And I was the leader of my section, and I took it with a lot of responsibility and a lot of enthusiasm. And on the day of the exam, I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay on the rehearsal. I want to do this like right. There's always like a second chance for me to go to the exam. It's not a big deal. And then in the middle of the orchestral rehearsal, I got a call that the professor is making a really big scene and that he doesn't want to start the exam without me coming. And I could not respond or something. I just wrote a message to my friend, I'm not coming, I'm playing right now. I'll talk to you later. And it was really stressful. And later I tried to get into contact with that professor and tried to call him, send him emails, kind of sent him a bunch of stuff. He ignored everything. And 2 days later I bumped into him at the academy. And he told me that I don't have to apologize to him, I need to apologize to my colleagues because he made a deal that if everybody showed up to the exam, then the lowest grade will be 3, and we have 1 to 5 grades. So even if you fail, if everybody comes, then you will pass. So something that's not really, well, fair or legal, kind of. And yes, so that's an example of exclusion. And also we were told a lot of times at my section at the clarinet department that we are not allowed to say no to a grade, which in Croatian law you can say no to a grade and then go to the next exam because we have 4 chances. So that's kind of a law that is quite often broken at my institution. And for inclusion, I have a really good example of a teacher that is very dear to us at our academy. He's quite young, and he comes from a bit of a smaller town, and he wanted to go study in Vienna, and he didn't have enough money to go there to fund it, and his local community kind of gathered enough funds for him to go and for him to live there until he finished his studies. And now he's a professor at our academy, and he's amazing. He really is a good example of a person and a teacher. So yes, thank you.
So,
Hello, I'm calling from Sweden. Our word was inclusion. We have a very flat organization, and it's easy, accessible for everyone. If you want to speak with the staff, and we have open doors. I have always my door open when not speaking, and so I have many of us. So we think it's a good way that the organization is. I don't know the proper English for that. Flat, is it? No, when it's no hierarchy. Have you? Yeah. Okay. Yes. In Sweden we say flat. Okay. Exclusion, or our example is access to rooms, service due to genre. We can see that the house is very good on some genres, but for example, folk and world music have not the access to everything in the same way as symphonic or a classical department, and we have quite a discussion about it that it was this hidden curriculum. We could see that maybe not so clearly, but when we talk about it, we can really see that there was exclusion in that. Thank you.
Carolina?
Thank you. So we talked with a Polish group and from Krakow and Kharkiv, And we found out that we have a quite common system of music education. And that might be an example of inclusion, because our system education provides free music education for everyone. So we have music schools on the basic level and high school level music schools for everyone, and we don't have to pay for that. But then, unfortunately, we don't have job for all those people who we educate. And then we don't have music on the more professional level in regular school. You know, music is music, so who cares about music in regular school? Then music is treated very professionally in music schools. But then we have too many candidates for the music schools. Then we have too many candidates for the studies, maybe, still. And then we have too many candidates for the job. There is no job. So this is the same example of the inclusion and exclusion at the same time. Besides, of course, there are some scholarships for the students from Ukraine. Sometimes the students cannot afford to, they can afford to studying, but nothing else, just like at the video, they cannot afford to go to summer camps or even accommodation. There's also an exclusion for poverty students if they don't have places to practice, because our academy doesn't support students at all. We don't have practice rooms for them, so immediately they don't have place for practice. Which is very, very important. So, well, yes, that would be our examples for now. And also we talked about the communication. So we have so many, that there are no clear rules for everyone that should be provided, but that's another discussion.
Yes, and so I was really privileged to have a conversation with our two colleagues from Rome, and I learned a lot about the school, which I didn't know. And it's a private school with many students, as many as 4,000 students, and a very high tuition rate, 4,000 euros. And so this means that most people are having financial problems in paying. So they felt that there was no exclusion in the sense that everybody could easily talk about the difficulties they had, and many people are working at the same time. This is a problem for the students. Of course, they all have to work to try and earn money. What I take away from possible areas which could be exclusionary is that there's a lot of information that doesn't seem to trickle down to the right people. So what I understand is that many in the institution don't know that they have funding opportunities through Europe. They don't know about international support for international study. And there was a feeling that teachers don't communicate with each other. So that means that there's sort of things that fall between the cracks. And this is maybe nothing is ever done on purpose, but it means that, if people are not talking to each other, that's a problem. But we felt that we were in a very different situation from many of the schools here, certainly when we hear about free music education to the east. I just want to say that we are perfectly on time after a perfect morning, thanks to the wonderful drama exercise and to the video. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry, I've just been corrected. She just found out that it's actually 2,000 euros. 2,000 students, 4,000 euros. Okay, so now that you know that essential piece of information, I would encourage you to all have a coffee and chat. And we are, I just want to say also that we are putting these flip charts up here, and I encourage you to take the time to read them, to learn what your colleagues are saying, and we will come back here at 11:30. Thank you.